What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the Season 1 finale of Raised by Wolves, a finale that I think on the whole did a pretty damn good job of wrapping up a lot of the lingering mysteries, while at the same time leaving the door open to all kinds of interesting possibilities next season. Because I'm reviewing the finale, I will be going into spoilers, but if you're new to the show, I'll leave a link in the video notes below where you can check out my review for the season premiere. At any rate, the finale was directed by Luke Scott, who directed episodes 3 and 4, and he also happens to be the son of Ridley Scott, who directed episodes 1 and 2. But more importantly, the finale was written by series creator Aaron Guzikowski, who over the course of this season has earned me as a massive fan. As I've mentioned in my past videos about the season, Guzikowski has accomplished that rare feat of creating some new intellectual property in the sci-fi genre. Hollywood these days tends to take the safe route, creating an endless series of remakes, reboots, and sequels to the great sci-fi franchises of the past, more often than not getting them wrong. And it's just a relief to have a new story that breaks some new ground. Of course, the story takes advantage of some well-established sci-fi tropes, but I'm just having a blast following a new show that treats the genre with the same reverence and attention to detail as you might find with an author writing some massive novel. I'm fascinated by this world, and this episode teased just enough information to satisfy me in the short term and leave me very fired up for what's to come. So before I dive into what went down during the season finale, I'll simply say that I think overall Raised by Wolves is a strong contender for the best sci-fi show of 2020, although if I'm being honest, I think Dark Season 3 wins in a head-to-head battle between the two shows. But with all that out of the way, let's dive into the details, and let's start with Marcus. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I was a little confused at the end of last episode as to what was going on with the necromancer's eye, and I couldn't quite tell what that Mithraic was doing with the eye. But now it's clear he basically just shoved it in the mouth of Marcus. And I'm not entirely sure what's happened to Marcus as a result, but he now has all these really gnarly veins across his forehead. He looks completely, totally deranged. His religious fervor is stronger than ever. And he basically spends the episode walking around raving like a madman, having all these visions. He has this one particularly vivid vision where he sees Hunter's arm turning into a snake and then biting him, and he's saying that Marcus is the one true servant of Saul. But it seems like whatever was left over from Marcus's past life is now gone. And at the end of the episode, we see him confronting all these new soldiers that have arrived on the planet. He takes out 3 rapidly, and I couldn't quite tell if he's gained some new enhanced abilities from digesting and processing the eye of the necromancer, but he's clearly still hell on wheels in combat, and he tells the surviving soldier that he's the king of this world, and then he speaks through the communication device to yet another Ark which is landing on this planet. And for my part, I'm thrilled to see the arrival of some new characters and some new technology, because the remaining technology on this planet was rapidly getting exhausted, used up, destroyed. And the arrival of this new Ark basically opens up limitless creative possibilities. Did this Ark come to this planet because it's one of the last potential inhabitable worlds? Is it one of many Arks exploring the universe? Is the war still ongoing between the Mithraics and the atheists? And will Marcus succeed at taking over this new society and basically become a totalitarian despot? Who can say? But my favorite part of this episode by far was all the information that we gathered about this world, its history, who these creatures are, what they might have been in the past. And we get this information on a variety of fronts. We get this fascinating scene where Paul follows his mouse into a cave and he finds all these cave paintings, but they're not just cave paintings, they're moving, or perhaps they're moving because they're being imbued by the power of Saul, if Saul in fact even does exist, which opens up the question, is there a connection between the religion of the Mithraics and this ancient society? Does Saul in fact exist? And I think the fact that it's an open-ended question is part of what makes this show so intense and exciting. But these paintings clearly foretold a lot of what has happened over the course of this season. We see this giant moving serpent, which is obviously part of the planet's history as well as its present now, thanks to Mother's brand new baby. But we also see images of Mother and Father arriving in their transporter. So clearly at some point, some form of civilized society lived here. At one point when Mother's looking down into one of the pits, one of these humanoid creatures very foolishly tries to attack her from behind. She turns around, kills it then and there with one shot. But as she and Father examine it, they realize that this creature is a slightly more advanced version in comparison to the other humanoids, and their theory is that these creatures are actually devolving from a previous state and becoming more primitive, which in essence makes every single person there who's been eating the flesh of these creatures cannibals. Something Mother and Father very wisely decided to keep a secret from the children. But as much as I love the depth and the detail of this world, I also really just enjoy the character interactions. We had this really sweet moment where Campion and Father were bonding and calling each other warriors, and my face was nothing but smiles throughout that whole scene. We also get some great melodrama between Mother and Father when they start to have a fight over the fact that she's been mating with somebody else in a virtual sense without him knowing it, and that she's been receiving additional programming. She's operating under the assumption that it's their creator who impregnated her, and that Campion and the the rest of the Gen 1 children only practice. But as she learns toward the end of the episode, the source of her new baby is clearly not her creator as she was led to believe. But what was great about the mother-father spat was how they still were talking like androids, but they were starting to experience all these very real human emotions. And I love how she described how father's capacity for human melodrama has increased exponentially. I mean, only androids fight this way, but I was just cracking up. But when it comes to messages from Saul, it's hard to know what's genuine and what's not because we seem to be getting a lot of conflicting information. Because Paul at one point claims he's received a message from Saul that the tropical side of the planet is going to be dangerous for mother's baby, but in that the baby is a giant flying serpent, it seems like that baby's going to do just fine wherever the hell it might be. But there has to be something genuine about the voices Paul's hearing because he actually finally confronts his mother Sue over the fact that she and Marcus are not in fact his parents, that they stole his parents' faces, that they're devils. And he straight up shoots her in the gut. But Sue's still alive, and through the kiss, she sends a warning to mother that the baby needs to come out now or it's going to die. But as it turns out, the baby was ready to come out anyway because we get this crazy birth sequence. Mother finds the remains of that religious relic which she saw in her vision, and as I'm fond of saying, it reminds me of the 12-sided die that you use in tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. In any event, when she's examining the helmet of the creature that's on top of the relic, she finds a head inside, and for me, it looked like an earlier version of what the necromancers look like when they're fully powered up, but perhaps that was just wishful thinking on my part, and maybe it was just human. But I'd be fascinated to learn what kind of connection there is between the Mithraics and whatever this ancient civilization used to be. But when the baby finally decides to come, it absolutely blew my mind. As I was watching the scene, I just kept saying to myself, are you shitting me? Because it was this giant flying snake with this horrible looking mouth with all these teeth, and it floats around for a few seconds before it just latches onto her and starts feeding like a baby. And it was so disturbing watching the way it was kind of writhing around her and kind of squishing between her fingers and how it's making little sounds like the necromancer when they're flying around. And I don't know if those flying abilities were inherited from the necromancer or if it would have been able to fly anyway. And who knows, maybe going back thousands of years, there's always been a connection between the Mithraics and the necromancers and these giant serpents. The show's doing a brilliant job of opening up all these questions and teasing information, but like a good poker player, keeping its cards very close to its chest. But when Father finds her, she acknowledges the father of her child is not their creator, it's something else to put the baby inside her. And she worries that once the serpent is finished draining her, that it's going to want blood and that nobody's going to be safe. But Father, who's been looking for a way to make himself feel useful and have a sense of purpose, he volunteers to fly both of them in the lander to the core of the planet. And what was fascinating about this magma core at the center of the planet was all these various tunnels leading back to the surface. And I thought that was the end of Mother, Father, and the baby. And this might be the one time the whole season where I kind of had to call bullshit. I don't know how hot the core of this planet is, but yet somehow this lander emerges unscathed on the other side and flies out to the other side of the planet. I just don't know how that's possible, but it's what the writers chose to write, so we're just going to have to roll with it. Because we see Mother and Father coming back online, they jump out of the lander, they land in this tropical zone, and the serpent now is just enormous. It's just this giant flying leviathan. And it's making these sounds that are eerily similar to the sounds that its mother used to make when she was flying around wreaking havoc earlier in the season. So at a minimum, this show managed to give us a massive big finish. Like I said, I'm a little bit dubious about the fact that this little ship could fly through the middle of the planet, but everything else I just found to be absolutely fascinating. I think the table's been set for an extraordinary conflict in season 2. And right now, this show is the only reason that I'm hanging on to my HBO Max subscription because, frankly, I'm not that impressed with HBO Max. What really annoys me is that I keep hearing news about them removing episodes of really funny shows like Aqua Teen Hunger Force. If HBO Max is trying to build a subscriber base of fans of animation and science fiction and just genre entertainment, censoring classic shows is not the way to go about it. So I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with HBO Max for now, but this show is strong enough that I'm going to hang in there for the time being and see what comes on this platform in the future. At any rate, it's been a very fun season. I've had a blast covering it, but I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. So I hope you enjoyed all my reviews for the show. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. And if you want to talk more about Raised by Wolves or HBO Max or any of the above mentioned topics, give me a shout on Twitter at Cobrax. But I can't thank you enough for watching the video. I really appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.